The Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, has declared that the organized private sector recorded unsatisfactory performance in 2024. NASIMA expressed the view in its New Year message signed by its national president, Dele Oye. Oye said that the 2024 economic performance was unsatisfactory for the private sector. He stated that all economic benefits of the current economic reforms went to the government through high capital transfers and revenues, while the private sector was faced with higher inflation, higher cost of borrowing, repayment for existing loans, $2.4 billion on paid forward contracts with the Central Bank of Nigeria, currency devaluation, and higher costs in all areas of its business operations. NASIMA said the imbalance caused by increased public sector expenditure and consequent borrowings had destroyed value in the private sector's investments due to government's unsustainable high interest rates. It also debunked the notion that government's increasing revenue was due to public sector's improved productivity. Joining us now on this show to discuss why the organized private sector underperformed in 2024 as we look ahead of 2025 is Dele Oye, President, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture. We also look ahead 2025 and the role of the organized private sector. Mr. Oye, welcome to the morning show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we have said NASIMA has lamented that the economic performance of the organized private sector in 2024 was very poor. But this year, 2025, we have two issues on the table. We have the budget, which the federal government says is going to ensure economic growth, prosperity, sustainability. You must have seen the details of that budget. Are you that optimistic? And then NASIMA is saying that contrary to what the federal government is proposing, VAT rates should be reduced. What the government is proposing is a progressive increase from 10% to, is it 25% by the year 2029? And then NASIMA says no. NASIMA is also saying corporate taxes should be reduced. So are you objecting to the VAT bill, to the revenue reform bill? Those two issues to go with.
Well, the issue is not necessarily about the bill. What is important is that we normally have inflation when government has spent its revenue. And the tendency for government is to try to borrow or to increase taxes to fill that gap. If you do that, you only make Nigeria poorer. If you look at our current GDP, in 2014, we were at 568. And we are going down every year. So you cannot use the same treatment for a sickness that has never worked before. Last year, we had a budget for 2024. And look at it in real terms, we are declining. In fact, this year's budget is far lower in real terms than last year's budget. And we are shrinking. And also look at our standing in the African GDP. We are about number 5 now, maybe going to 6. All these are due to the domestic policies that have been made. Deficit financing, this coordinated transfer from the private sector to the public sector. So what you are seeing is that the private sector is shrinking while the public sector is expanding. So government must listen more to the business because it's the business that will generate the income that will be used to pay these loans. The loans are not sustainable. Until we start cutting down costs in the government sector, it will be very difficult to grow the economy. So government must listen more to the private sector. We are not unaware of the effort the government has made in giving us 2 ministers recently in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment to support the private sector. We are grateful and we are fully engaging with them. But what is important, government must also get its other organizations, other MDAs, the Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, all of them to key in and work with the private sector. Because we are the one to pay the loans back from our production. Government does not produce any goods or services. A holding contract is not a It's not an economic activity or you are launching a project. What pays for these bills is the efforts of the private sector. So government must work with us. And if you look at the current budget, show me anything that is different from the 2024. There's nothing. It's the same old budget. So we need to change. The people that are telling the president that he's doing very well, they should show us. All the indices show there's a decline. So it is not to tax us more or to increase tax. In fact, to increase our competitiveness, we must find a way to reduce tax. Anytime we are making laws in Nigeria, look at what our neighbors are offering. And before we plug in our own rates so that we can be competitive. So this is the reason. We cannot tax ourselves out of this problem. We have to increase capacity of the private sector. We are not asking for a handout. We are not asking for money from government. But if government, we have the formula that will bring down the interest rates so that people can borrow at sustainable levels. The president himself gave us an 8-point agenda that he will give us single-digit loans. I'm not asking for government to give us money, but government should create the enabling environment. We need to sit down with government to establish this. So this is what NASIMA is saying in a nutshell.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Dele, and you've been quite vocal about this in terms of the government's role in providing an enabling environment for the private sector to thrive in Nigeria. But as we look forward into 2025, I know last year you were quite vocal. In one of your speeches, you talked about some of the economic policies of this administration that had almost crippled the economy and the activities of the private sector, some of which the president has been quite adamant that he's not going back on, floating of the Naira, rule of subsidy and how it's affected the private sector and the run of businesses. But moving forward, you talk about the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and we've talked about how critical a role they're going to play in this year to improve the economic outlook of Nigeria or the economic outcome of Nigeria by the end of the year. What are some of the major things that NASIMA and the organized private sector are looking for in terms of reform? You've talked about reform in certain sectors, not just concentration in telecommunications. You looked at aviation, looked at other sectors. But what are some of the key things that you'd like to see as reform, especially by the ministry?
One of the biggest, we have actually highlighted 12 recommendations in our New Year message, which is already in the public space. In addition, government must take seriously the issue of the Naira. That's the biggest driver of inflation. Nobody will invest in a climate where the currency melts every day. You will not change your dollars for Naira. So this is the biggest driver of inflation. And if you see, throughout the 2024, we kept shouting. We engaged privately first, and eventually we started going to the public space, that the CBN punishment, collective punishment for the business sector, for the sins of the public sector, because the entire private sector will have to be paying higher interest rates for loans. And it was not sustainable. That's why we are shrinking. So what government needs to do now, government needs to find a way to cut down its running costs, reduce its deficit financing, and pay back the loans they owe. They should stop borrowing, especially in the local space. If you do that, you will notice that those money, if it is paid back and there's a cap on public borrowing, because they already crowded us out from borrowing, because the government ready to write bonds at 21%. So why should the banks talk to us? You can see all the profits they are declaring. It has no relationship with the real sector. And the central bank has been very imperial in its approach to this. And we've said this several times, that these policies will not work. At the end of the year, the records are there. They are wrong and we're right. So I'm telling Mr. President this time, he should not allow him to be deceived again. Because if we start this budget the way it is structured, we are going to end up smaller next year. So it is better we work together. Nigeria has one of the best private entrepreneurs. We have the capacity to turn around this economy. My members are ready. If there's increased stakeholders engagement, consultation, before policies are dumped on us, we don't want to wake up in tomorrow, we see all sorts of policy inconsistencies. You just announce this is the new policy, we should all go ahead. Okay. If government intends to really wants to drive this economy, it must use the capacity of the private sector, and most importantly, all our abilities. We have already demonstrated this. If you look at most of the areas where the things are working, government is not yet there. Look at our creative industry.
Okay.
Look at even the small POS person. When the government entered, you can see what has happened. So
okay, Mr. Dele,
what I'm trying to say,
talking about things that are working,
use our talent.
Right, sorry to interject, but as you're talking about things that are working, I want to flash back to an end of last year when the president made a statement that, the economy that we had been enjoying, or, the life that Nigerians had been living was a fake good life. By that, of course, he was referring to the fact that it was a pegged exchange rate. Now, what did this do? This created room for a lot of arbitrage, and a lot of people made a lot of money because of access to foreign currency at a pegged rate at the central bank, and then the ability to get black market rates elsewhere. So, a lot of people made money from that. Secondly, the subsidy, we all know the corruption that was happening therein and so forth. So, when you look at that context of the ticking time bomb that was created by this false sense of stability, are you saying that we were better off with the false sense of stability, number one? And number two, how can the private sector, the organized private sector, reorganize themselves for the new realities that the exchange rate will be fluctuating and that the petroleum industry has been deregulated? What are some of the moves that the organized private sector is making to work in tandem with the effort to deregulate the economy?
Well, NASIMA is not advocating for a reversal of the government reforms. All we're asking is that the way it is currently being implemented will not lead us anywhere. We have seen this government has been here for almost 2 years. You cannot continue to complain. If it was working, we are not supposed to inherit these reforms. It's supposed to happen during the lifespan of these 4 years of this government. So if it is not working, the economy is shrinking, it is time for the government to change the procedure. Instead of trying to use the imperial way, which most of the agencies have used in dealing with us, the government must engage. The government must listen more to us and use our ideas as for policies. We can further implement these policies if the government listens more to us. That's what I'm saying. I'm not asking for a reversal. The reason why the Naira is falling is because government is running a deficit budget, a 13 trillion deficit. What do you expect? It's going to affect the value of the Naira. If we cut government expenses down, the Naira will continue it will start appreciating. This is what I'm saying. Until you reduce that, cut all these excesses, we are going to continue to borrow in an unsustainable way. And you can see the effect. Our Naira will continue to go down. So government must cut these excesses, work with us, use our talents, and find a way. This is our country. We've done it before. In 2014, we became the best in Africa. And when we rebase our economy, those sectors that brought that rebasing, the telecoms and everything, they are all suffering today. The MTNs have lost over 100 billion in currency depreciation. And that is an industry that requires continued investment for them to continue to be competitive because the technologies are involved. So we must find a way to give them their sense of security back, give them an environment that where they can work and make more money, and government will generate more tax income. It's not the percentage that makes government. You cannot tax a debt company. So you must find a way. Listen to us more here. The problem is at home. It's not in traveling abroad and seeking foreign direct investment. They should tell us how much have come in those several trips. Nothing. Okay. I used to travel with them. I stopped with Qatar. So what I'm trying to say is the strategy must change. You must find a way to include us so that we can all resolve this. It's our problem. And I think Mr. President has been bold enough to put the policy before us. I'm not asking for a reversal. I'm asking for a recalibration, having the private sector to lead in some of these things. It is not the business of government to be in business. Government is a facilitator. So government must find a way to continue to be a facilitator, encourage the private sector, create an environment where a lot of people come to Nigeria as a destination for investment. This is all I'm asking for.
Okay, Mr. Oye, look, your point is clear. You want government to change strategy, move from emphasis on public expenditure and, work with the private sector. But look, we hear that the government makes the claim that it's in partnership with organized private sector, particularly with NASIMA. As recently as early December, I saw a report indicating that the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Dr. Jumoke Udwole, met with NASIMA. And the key points coming out of that meeting was about partnership, foreign direct investment, attracting investors to Nigeria, and all of that. Okay, this is routine. We hear about it all the time. Private sector-led growth and all that. Are you accusing the administration of hypocrisy? Because we hear of these meetings. Is it that when NASIMA and similar bodies go to those meetings with government, you people have no ideas to give them in terms of alternatives, or they don't listen to you? Are you accusing government of hypocrisy? Or you are saying the partnership they talk about does not exist? So what is the purpose of all those meetings?
I already started first by thanking Mr. President, because there's a tendency to change strategy. Because for the first time, we have 2 ministers. I must also mention it is true, the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment visited NASIMA at the NASIMA Secretariat, and we had a 4-hour strategy session. It was supposed to be a 1-hour meeting. I can tell you there's likely to be a change, but this minister needs to also be further empowered, because we have to, if you look at what is in the budget, I know she may not, I don't know how much role she plays being a new minister, but these budgets as it is, if you don't domicile it in the private sector, government does not cut its expenses, you are going to have the same result. We are very happy with the minister. We've already agreed to, in fact, we have started working together this year. She's already written me a first letter this year for us to do a joint event. So we are very happy, but we need other sectors of the government to also key in. The central bank is playing one of the most critical roles in its monetary policy. It has continued to punish the private sector by increasing all our interest rates. The MPR rate kept going up, whereas we were not the one causing the problem. You can't borrow at 35 to 40% and you expect to run any economy. It's not going to happen. The president agenda is there. He said he'll give us single-digit loan. I'm not asking for a handout, but pay your local debts, the rates will crash, and put a ceiling on public borrowing. And that way, it will be accessible. You will see there was a time in Nigeria where banks were funding roads, funding hospitals, funding everything. We want to go back to that area where people can access loans at reasonable prices. This is the challenge. And if government reduces its own expenses, you see the naira will start appreciating, and that's what we're asking for. That is the sacrifice. They've asked us to make sacrifice the private sector will make, but we are not seeing the same from the public sector. We are engaging now. We hope it will sustain, but there are 2 key drivers, like I've mentioned. The CBN must key in, and also the Ministry of Finance. They must all work with us so that we can have one, so that we can come out. The current position where we are now, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. How can you live from 568 to 2014? We are shrinking. Anybody that is telling the president we are moving up is lying to the president. So this is what we're asking. We need better engagement. We have started with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. We need the same thing from Ministry of Finance. We need the same thing from Central Bank. And this fight between Central Bank and the Bureau de Change, they must find a way to stop it, because we are the losers. You cannot come in as a CBN governor. Within 1 year, you're already an expert in Bureau de Change. These guys have been in the business for so long. Why are they changing the rules every day for them to deal? And what has happened, most of them have gone underground, sabotaging all of us. So we must find a way to use everyone's talent, find a way to make Nigeria work, find a way to take us back to 2014, where we were the best in Africa. This is all I'm asking for. And we are ready. We have the formula to work with the government on some of these things. We should not use the same strategy we used last year and fail again. I don't want us to waste another year. Because if the government succeeds, I make money. My members make money. If the government makes mistakes, we lose. We all lose. So it's in my interest for the government to succeed. They've told us we don't want this to stay in the blackboards. They should move it to a drawing board. We all sit down, have a reasonable stakeholders engagement in every sector. Find a way what is not working. Remove it. Remove all the red tapes and let all of us work together. This is what NASIMA is asking for.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dele. I'm sure that they're listening to you. I hope they have heard you. And I hope something positive will come out of your concerns as expressed.